What's the problem?
Oh, just a full-on code redneck. Hey, bye!
Wait a second, I thought we were going hiking.
Got Kim down here.
You're kidding.
Howdy.
Fuck, man!
The sheriff, he hasn't been accommodating thus far. We're looking for a friend of ours who's up in the mountains.
Get the gun off the girl.
The story kicks off with two cops, Lee and Rhodes, staking out a drug cartel's hideout. Before they get down to business, Lee hands Rhodes a watch as a keepsake. But when they storm the place, it's completely empty.
Don't get the word.
Knocking down doors, banging.
Confused, they step back outside to check the perimeter, unaware that the criminals are actually hiding in a secret room inside the building. Suddenly, the gang ambushes them. Lee gets shot, and Rhodes quickly retaliates, taking down most of the attackers. But one of them stabs Rhodes, turning the tables. Just when things look bad for him, Lee steps in and takes out the last enemy. Realizing the building is about to explode, Lee urges Rhodes to run. Rhodes manages to escape the blast, but Lee isn't so lucky and dies in the explosion. Fast forward 4 months, and we find ourselves in Nevada. The police are chasing down a gang of robbers who just pulled off a heist. However, their communication system gets hacked, allowing the criminals to slip away.
909 suspect.
Turns out, this crew stole a whopping $10 million from a casino, and they're led by a guy named Banks, with an older man named Lawson calling the shots from behind the scenes. After the job, Lawson quietly sneaks away to burn the getaway car, erasing any evidence. Meanwhile, Banks and his crew excitedly open the bag, expecting stacks of cash, only to find a live bomb instead. To make things worse, Lawson has locked them inside with no way out. Realizing they've been double-crossed, Banks desperately works to defuse the bomb. At the same time, Lawson, now in full control of the money, tries to trigger the explosion remotely.
Surprise.
But Banks manages to stop it just in time. Now furious and out for revenge, Banks and his crew vow to hunt down Lawson. He orders his hacker, Geary, to track Lawson using a hidden tracker placed in his clothes earlier. Meanwhile, Rhodes is enjoying a quiet day outdoors with his daughter, Kim. She leaves to meet a friend, while Rhodes gets ready for a hunting trip with a buddy. But his plans take a turn when he gets a call from the local sheriff.
But this is getting ridiculous.
Kim's been caught stealing from a store, and he needs to come down to the station immediately. At the station, Kim is being questioned when Banks and his crew storm in, demanding the sheriff's help in finding Lawson, who is hiding somewhere in the nearby forest. But since Banks' crew doesn't know the terrain, they need guidance. Meanwhile, Lawson is already making his way towards the border through the woods. Rhodes arrives at the station and immediately notices two suspicious men waiting outside. As soon as he steps inside, Banks' right-hand woman, Dominica, points a gun at him. Confused, Rhodes demands to know what's going on. Banks explains they're searching for a man hiding in the forest, but since the sheriff refused to help, they've taken over the station and everyone inside.
What happened?
Yeah, well,
including Kim. Realizing the danger, Rhodes offers to help track Lawson, but only if they release Kim and the sheriff first.
It is to me.
Banks agrees to let Kim go later, but instead of freeing the sheriff, he kills him on the spot. One of Banks' men then tries to take Rhodes by surprise, but Rhodes fights back.
some more.
Unfortunately, his opponent's gun is empty, forcing him to surrender. Knowing his daughter's life is at stake, Rhodes plays it smart and doesn't reveal that Kim is actually his daughter. With Kim as leverage, they head into the forest to track Lawson. However, they soon discover that Lawson ditched his tracking device, making it much harder to find him. Kim is visibly scared, but Rhodes reassures her, promising they'll get out of this.
Yeah, stupid. Him.
No need.
At one point, Kim asks to take a bathroom break, but moments later, Rhodes hears her scream. He rushes over and finds one of Banks' men trying to assault her. Furious, Rhodes attacks the man without hesitation, beating him senseless. Banks, realizing the troublemaker within his crew, orders Jensen to deal with him. This incident makes Banks suspicious about Rhodes and Kim's relationship. To test his theory, he pretends to shoot Rhodes.
Next!
Panicked, Kim instinctively yells out, "Dad." This confirms Banks' suspicions. Kim isn't just some random girl, she's Rhodes' daughter. Now, the stakes are even higher. As they continue their search, the hacker, Geary, starts complaining about being exhausted and thirsty. Jensen, clearly annoyed, mockingly offers him some urine to drink, which sparks a fight between them. Seeing an opportunity, Rhodes whispers to Kim to run. She tries to escape, but Banks quickly catches on and stops her. Now, Banks is done playing games. He warns Rhodes that if he or Kim try anything again, they'll both be killed on the spot. With no other choice, Rhodes has to play along for now. After a long day of trekking, they finally stop to rest.
And kill me.
Once everyone was deep asleep, Rhodes tried to free Kim's hands. But before he could succeed, Jensen caught him in the act and immediately struck Rhodes on the head. The next morning, they resumed their journey towards the Canadian border, assuming Lawson was heading there. Along the way, Rhodes stumbled upon a map that had been partially burned at a campfire, clearly used by Lawson. This meant Lawson couldn't be too far from where they were now.
Oh, fuck.
Later, while the hacker was resting in a tree, he made a gruesome discovery, a dead body. It turned out to be one of Rhodes' friends who had gone hunting in the forest. Examining the corpse, Rhodes quickly deduced that Lawson was behind the murder, likely suspecting the man was part of Banks' crew sent to kill him. They pressed on with their search and finally found Lawson lying weakly in a tree, clearly wounded. He must have fought Rhodes' friend before killing him. Without hesitation, Banks demanded to know where the stolen money was. Even in his battered state, Lawson refused to say a word and instead mocked them, calling them a bunch of fools who had been easily deceived. His taunts enraged Dominica, who lost her temper and killed Lawson right then and there. With Lawson dead, Banks and his crew lost some of their drive to continue searching for the money. But Kim, thinking fast, suggested they check near the river, figuring that if she kept them occupied, she and her father might survive a little longer. Her guess was spot on, and they eventually located the money. However, it was sitting dangerously close to the edge of a steep cliff. None of Banks' men were brave enough to retrieve it, so Rhodes seized the opportunity to strike a deal. He climbed down and get the money if they agreed to free Kim first. Banks, of course, wasn't about to agree so easily. He told Rhodes that Kim would only be set free once the money was in his hands. With no other choice, Rhodes carefully climbed down and managed to grab the bag of cash. But as soon as he handed it over, Banks shot him, and Jensen cut the rope, sending Rhodes tumbling down the cliff. Banks then turned his attention to Kim, ready to get rid of her. But before he could pull the trigger, Kim quickly claimed she knew a shortcut out of the forest. Banks, always thinking about his own survival, decided to spare her, for now. He forced her to lead the way. As they walked, Geary took an interest in Kim's looks and made an inappropriate move on her. When she rejected him, he snapped, beating her in anger. Dominica, however, wasn't having it. She stepped in, giving Geary a brutal beating of his own. Fed up with his behavior, Banks and the rest of the crew abandoned Geary, leaving him alone in the wilderness. Meanwhile, Rhodes had miraculously survived the fall. Injured but determined, he found a hidden supply stash and armed himself with a crossbow. As night fell, Banks and his crew, exhausted and starving, decided to rest. But there was a problem. All their food was in Geary's backpack. Elsewhere in the forest, Geary, now alone, was feasting on his supplies, staying alert for any wild animals that might attack. Rhodes, now prepared for battle, made his move. His first target? Geary. Using his crossbow, he took him out without hesitation. Knowing Kim was still with Banks' crew, Rhodes pressed on. The next morning, as Banks and his team continued their journey, Kim had a strong feeling that her father was still alive. Trusting her instincts, she discreetly left behind clues to help him find her. At one point, Jensen lagged behind the group to smoke a cigarette. Seizing the opportunity, Rhodes confronted him, and a brutal fight broke out. Despite being smaller, Jensen was a fierce fighter and managed to land several heavy blows. But in the end, Rhodes overpowered him, impaling him with a wooden log. When Banks and Dominica called out for Jensen and got no response, they decided to move on without him. Kim, however, knew in her gut that her father had won that fight. As they neared the Canadian border, Rhodes suddenly reappeared, hurling a massive log at Banks. But instead of hitting its target, the log struck Dominica, killing her instantly. Furious, Banks threatened to kill Kim if Rhodes didn't back off. A gunfight ensued, forcing Rhodes into a tough spot, and he tumbled down a ravine. Thinking he was finally rid of him, Banks forced Kim to keep moving towards the border. But Rhodes wasn't finished yet. Despite his injuries, he got back on his feet and continued his pursuit. Meanwhile, Banks and Kim had reached a campsite near the border. Desperate to escape, Banks shot several campers and, realizing he was running out of time, knocked Kim unconscious before stealing a motorbike to flee. Moments later, Rhodes arrived and quickly told Kim to get help. As Banks sped away, he soon realized Rhodes was still after him. He tried to hide in a warehouse, but Rhodes found him, and the two engaged in an intense fight. Rhodes ultimately overpowered Banks and retrieved the stolen money. Just when it seemed like it was over, Banks, bloodied but still alive, spat out insults at Kim in front of Rhodes. That was the last straw. Enraged, Rhodes finished him off in the most brutal way possible, by ramming a motorbike into him and blowing it up. With Banks finally dead, Rhodes and Kim were safe at last. And that's how it all ended. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment.